Goodbye, insufficiently cruel world.
Oh
no! In today's episode, we see Mr. Burns feeling devastated by everyone's indifference when they find out he only has a few weeks to live. In secret, Bart takes him to his family's house. The episode starts with a secret meeting of America's media empires where they plan to create news that will generate the next fake crisis, putting Americans back in their place. They start discussing what this crisis should be, and when someone suggests creating a new disease that would affect everyone and cause a new epidemic...
A new disease. No one's immune. It's like the summer of the shark, except instead of a shark, it's an epidemic, and instead of summer, it's all the time!
Everyone agrees excitedly, except one man who liked to be contrary. This man says they couldn't invent a new virus. Then another man says they had an ace up their sleeve, but it hadn't been tested yet. He decides to call the NBC representative and test the virus on him. As soon as the man drops dead, everyone agrees it's a deadly disease. However, now they needed to find something common in every home that could be blamed for the disease.
But Wow. Oh, yeah.
In the next moment, we see the newspaper announcing the cat flu that was coming and that the disease could spread quickly. Therefore, people needed to be careful with their cats. Right after the report, Homer grabs a plastic bag and tongs to remove the cat from Marge's lap. The news advises people not to turn off the news to get more information and alerts about the signs of the disease. Next, we see several reporters at Krusty's establishment to ask about the cat sandwich he was serving. Then we see firefighters now putting cats back into trees instead of rescuing them. Meanwhile, Homer's throwing away everything the cat had touched and shouts for Bart to help him because he doesn't want the virus to make them paranoid. Homer starts to light a match to burn the pile of things the cat had touched, but Marge stops him every time. She tells him that a vaccine has already been created and he doesn't need to burn those things. Suddenly, Grandpa comes out of the pile of objects, and Marge asks if Homer knew he was there, but Homer says he thought it was just a pile of rags. Finally, he agrees to go get the vaccine.
Homer, did you know he was in the pile?
I thought he was an old clump of rags.
At the hospital emergency room, a huge line has formed, with everyone waiting for the vaccine. The mayor makes an announcement saying there are only enough vaccines for one child per family, which makes the people in line angry. Meanwhile, the Simpsons are at the end of the line. And the comic book guy arrives dressed as Wolverine and explains that the costume was to give him the courage to get the vaccine, but he quickly gets distracted by an ice cream truck passing by. Then Mr. Burns arrives in his car and runs over everyone in line until he gets to the emergency reception.
Mr. Burns, where's he going?
He asks for 37 doses of the vaccine. One for him, one for Smithers, and the rest for his dogs. The mayor tells Dr. Julius to give the doses to Mr. Burns because he is the only one who pays taxes in the town. Julius questions what about the people who waited in line, but Mr. Burns explains the need to vaccinate his dogs. Smithers grabs all 37 vaccines and suggests they leave quickly before people start to hate them. As they look at the crowd, a mob has formed and everyone is looking at them angrily. They get in the car and Burns starts driving but ends up running over the vaccine boxes, breaking all the vials. When the liquid spills on the ground, Chief Wiggum throws himself on the floor to get the vaccine and calls for the crowd to do the same, but no one follows him. Back at Mr. Burns' mansion, he prepares to get the vaccine. As soon as he gets the dose in his nose, he starts saying he already feels revitalized. However, his doctor says he evaluated his blood test earlier and has bad news. Mr. Burns is close to dying due to various factors. Feeling down, Burns asks how much time he has left, and the doctor says he has about 5 or 6 weeks at most. At this moment, Smithers asks if Mr. Burns wants his employees to know the news, but he replies that he wants to give the news himself and that he will do it in the simplest way he knows.
How long do I have?
5, 6 weeks tops. You might live to see the wheat-eared warbler return to Swinton Park, but I wouldn't count on it.
In the next scene, we see a huge event at his mansion with all the employees arriving. At the table where Homer, Marge, Lenny, and Carl are sitting, they start complaining about having to come there and notice that he only hired funeral music. Mr. Burns gets on stage and informs everyone that he has bad news. Some people comment that he might be raising the electricity rates or something like that, and Apu even makes a joke about it, but he explains that he is dying. Homer is the first to celebrate, and some others think it must be a joke, but hope it isn't. Burns says it's true, and everyone excitedly celebrates.
My days are Roman numeraled. Stop this at once, or else.
Well, what? You're just gonna die soon anyway.
Mr. Burns insists he can be their worst temporary enemy, but no one cares. Soon, Smithers appears and calls him to leave. Burns understands that he is hated by everyone, and before leaving says he will leave his fortune to build a tree that will bear fruit shaped like his face, and that they will be as delicious and addictive as they are poisonous. Then everyone rushes to melt Mr. Burns's ice sculpture, which only makes him realize he truly has no friends. Smithers tries to say he is his friend, but Burns says he can't be since Smithers is paid by him. Then he goes to his room, but sees that the bed is full of coats and tells Smithers to shred them all and use the rags to wax his car.
Why does everyone hate me?
In the middle of the night, Burns goes to a cliff with the intention of jumping off. However, Smithers shows up and tries to stop him. Burns explains that he wants a peaceful death, his way. He jumps but ends up landing on a passing airplane. Afterward, he gets thrown off and hit by lightning. He falls through some tree branches until he lands in the woods.
Goodbye, insufficiently cruel world.
Oh no!
The next morning, Bart is walking through the forest using a stick to identify animal poop when he finds Mr. Burns on the ground. He believes his poop stick brought Burns back to life. Bart smells the stick until Burns gets up, starts calling Bart a friend, and says some nonsense. Bart begins to run away from Burns and says his brains must have turned to mush. Burns chases Bart, saying his name is Mush. As he runs, he trips and falls on his nose. Bart looks back at him but decides to keep going. He then sees a bird trying to eat Burns's tongue. With that, he goes back and thinks about what to do with him. When they get home, Bart gives Burns some of his clothes to wear and talks to him, explaining that even though he is nice now, his dad hates him, so he needs to hide him in his room. Burns agrees to this condition. Soon Marge starts yelling, wanting to know who Bart is talking to. He runs to hide Burns in his closet. When Marge enters the room, Bart makes up a story that he was playing with his action figure. She looks around and then inside Bart's closet, but doesn't find anything, and leaves the room. Bart runs to open the closet and sees Burns eating a teddy bear. Bart says he'll get him some food, and soon after, Burns vomits all the stuffing he ate from the teddy bear. Now we see Smithers in a bar, looking very upset, talking about his loss with the bartender. He explains that he now has a new boss who is very similar to the old one, cruel, studied at the same college, and has peculiar tastes. That's all he knows for now. Soon the train arrives and Smithers leaves the bar to board it. Meanwhile, in Springfield, they announce Mr. Burns' funeral, even though they haven't found the body. The people present are only there to spit on Burns's grave. Everything is broadcast on TV, and Marge watches with Homer and Lisa. They make comments, even about people dancing on the grave. When Marge says it's a good thing Mr. Burns isn't alive to see this, he appears in the living room after Bart yells at him for not finishing his bath. Then Bart shows up with a towel for him.
I finished giving you your bath.
Whoa!
After everything is explained, Lisa says that Burns is in shock from the trauma he went through. Homer thinks it's great to have the most cruel man they've ever known in his hands and starts explaining his plans for Burns, ending with an evil laugh. Marge tells Homer that just because Burns was cruel to him, it doesn't mean Homer should do the same now that Burns is defenseless. She suggests taking Burns to trial to decide how they should treat him. Once everyone is gathered, the mayor asks who is in favor of treating Burns the same way he treated everyone. Everyone except Marge and Lisa votes in favor. Lisa stands up and quotes Shakespeare, but everyone boos her. Frustrated, Lisa explains that even though she's only 8 years old, she has the courage to speak her mind in front of the entire town. Lisa walks to the stage and starts defending Mr. Burns. She says that despite all the cruelty he has committed, it doesn't justify everyone taking advantage of his current state to get revenge. She argues that Burns is no longer the same person, but the audience ignores her and insists he seems the same, which disappoints her. In another scene, we see Smithers working for the vice president. He has to remove all the wings from bees, and when he asks why he's doing that, the vice president admits he doesn't know, but says he is feeling bored. Now, Homer hands a list to Bart and explains that each citizen of the town will have half an hour with Burns to get their revenge on him. Homer is the first on the list. He uses a carrot as bait to make Mr. Burns walk through a construction site. Luckily, Burns manages to avoid all the dangers until he steps on a beam. As it rises, he walks to the end where there's nothing left and he falls to the ground.
Where's the other girder?
At Apu's store, a robbery is happening. The snake robber threatens to shoot Apu if he doesn't hand over the money. Apu grabs Mr. Burns and tells the robber he can take it out on him because Burns is now his manager, and it's his time for revenge. The snake robber refuses, saying his revenge plan for Burns is different: ice skating. Now there's a barbecue happening. It's Nelson's turn with Burns, and he treats him like he's his father, but soon Nelson's time is up, and the bullies arrive, each wanting Burns' attention for a different revenge. Later, we see it's Otto's turn, and he brings Burns back to the Simpsons' house, saying he used him to light his pipes. Lisa hands Mr. Burns to Homer and says it's his turn again. However, Homer isn't excited because he says he's already done everything he wanted to do to Burns last time he had him. This gives Lisa a chance to show that not everyone in town is bad. When she leaves with Burns, Maggie shows up wanting to get her revenge on him, but Lisa doesn't let her and takes Burns somewhere else.
Cruel. Not today.
Lisa takes Mr. Burns to his mansion. When they enter, Burns starts talking about how many friends he could bring there. Lisa explains that the man who lived there didn't have many friends because he wasn't very nice to people. As they walk, Burns sees a painting of himself sitting on a throne made of skulls and quickly recognizes it. Lisa says that indeed it is him, but at the same time, it's not because now he has a new personality. However, Burns quickly reverts to his old self, sits on his throne, and declares that Daddy is back. Next, we see Smithers working for his new boss. While he delivers the news from the paper, someone quickly calls for him. When Smithers sees that it's Mr. Burns, he's so happy that he even feels like hugging him, but Burns refuses because he doesn't want to smell cheap perfume. He allows Smithers to hug his shadow, which Smithers does. Then Smithers turns to the vice president, thanks him for their time together, and says he's now with Mr. Burns. The vice president agrees, but says he needs to erase Smithers' memory first, which he does. As the Simpson family is gathered at the table, a voice starts calling everyone insects. The whole town comes out of their houses, and when Flanders talks about his plan for the next half hour with Burns, Burns takes the opportunity to announce that his memory had returned and he had planned revenge on the entire town, putting everyone under a dome. When they tell him that this has already been done, he gives up on the idea. Then he thinks of trapping everyone in individual bubbles, but after they say it's the same thing, Burns gives up on that idea too and tells the helicopter to land. Marge starts to tell Mr. Burns that he couldn't do bad things to everyone since it was thanks to their help that he lived longer than expected. She says he can help everyone. Burns begins to question if kindness really helped him live longer. He decides to offer a candy to Ralph to see how he feels. As soon as he gives the candy, he feels very bad, even with blood coming from his nose. He takes the candy back from Ralph, and seeing that this makes him feel normal again, concludes that what keeps him alive is the bitterness in his body. He then thanks Springfield for giving him the secret to eternal life, hate, and gets back into his helicopter.
Young man, would you like a lemon drop?
The helicopter starts to fly, and inside is Nelson. When Burns asks what he's doing there, Nelson explains that Burns was his dad for 2 hours, and he wouldn't let him leave. Burns says he won't be anyone's dad, and at that moment, Nelson threatens to crash the helicopter if Burns doesn't agree to see a play he's going to perform at school. To end the episode, we see Nelson acting in a play where he plays a neglectful father, pretending his son doesn't exist. Nelson feels sad about the scene, and in the end, we see Mr. Burns in the audience saying that Nelson is his boy. Thanks for watching.